In 19th century New Brunswick, shipbuilding was the primary value-added industry in the province. It brought enormous wealth to the colony and attracted craftsmen and common laborers from other areas to the centers of activity along St. John and especially in Charlotte County. Despite these lucrative enterprises, however, in towns such as St. Stephen and St. Andrews, Charlotte County continued, along with the rest of the province, to develop as a rural economy. The Second Agricultural Society of New Brunswick was actually founded in Charlotte County as early as 1819, and a cursory perusal of Charlotte County's personal directories from the end of the 19th century reveal that the vast majority of men in the area registered their current occupations as farmer, fishermen being the second most numerous group. The boundary between careers could be a blurry one. In the words of Bennett Comeau, circa 1950, 1 cow and you're still a fisherman, 2 cows and you're a farmer. That being said, the identity of a farmer during this time extended beyond the tasks customarily associated with agriculture, such as tending to livestock and working in the fields. These occupations were more or less seasonal, and come wintertime, almost every boy and man would tramp out to the forests instead of the fields, axe, saw, and team of workhorses in hand. This was because the thriving shipbuilding industry, and later on the pulp and paper industry, could guarantee a market for New Brunswick lumber and promised a ready wage. This was a tempting offer for rural families that were usually strapped for cash. And so, rural people developed a dual identity related to both agriculture and forestry. This duality was so ingrained in the rural psyche that when it came time to register in local directories or to declare an occupation on official documents like a marriage certificate or a birth certificate, it would have seemed unnecessary to explain both sources of income. To indicate that you were a farmer would suffice to indicate that you worked in both field and forest. The readiness of these men to work in forestry made shipbuilding barons rich, which drew new investors into the province in turn. But New Brunswick has always struggled because of its small population, and by dividing the attention and application of working men between two vocations, the shipbuilding industry that had once been a boon to the economy eventually took its toll on it. When the shipbuilding industry, and then the pulp and paper industry, eventually and inevitably dissipated, they left in their wake an entire population that now had to depend on agriculture alone for their support. The dual identity of dairymen and woodsmen often precluded those farmers from identifying as dairymen and producers. Because of relative disinterest in learning about new technology or detailed feeding and breeding strategies, because they were able to work the woods, agricultural practices fell far behind that of other provinces. That being said, several initiatives have been taken by the federal and provincial governments to encourage value-added processing outside of the lumber sector. Even prior to the disintegration of that sector, dairy processing was explicitly encouraged. In 1894, a dairy school was established at the Sussex Dairy Company in Kings County, managed by Professor J.W. Watts Robertson, who was also dairy commissioner for the province. The school reopened in 1896, and this time the provincial government agreed to pay half of the travel expenses for any out-of-county students who enrolled. This increased attendance. In addition to the good practices being taught in Sussex, a traveling educational program was established in order to reach those who were unable to leave their farms. Mr. Abner Allward of Kings County and 2 colleagues traveled to almost every major town in New Brunswick with a van full of equipment, including the Babcock milk tester. And they taught cheese-making workshops to the people, but not surprisingly, Allward did not make a single stop in Charlotte County, despite its large population and popularity elsewhere. In 1889, cheese coming from the Sussex dairy sold at 8 cents per pound, and price and export potential to England increased further the next year during the Boer War. However, despite the fact that the production of dairy and dairy products provided such high returns, very few farmers used their winter hours to study or to refine that craft because, in Charlotte County, it was still possible to find some ready work in the woods. The price of butter and milk was high, and so milk was sold habitually as a wholesale product, instead of being refined into a value-added, economically prudent product. Cheesemaking failed to gain footing outside of the home industry, where it was made in plain, small batches and sold from the kitchen to the grocers directly. Evidence of the home industry lies in the common practice of each family having a cow, also the notable absence of professional cheesemakers listed in either business or private directories in Charlotte County, which is telling. However, the presence of men in Charlotte County who worked on the periphery of dairy processing, milk dealers like Henry Bell from Milltown, New Brunswick, or those who sold cream separators in their tinware and hardware shops, like James Wilson of St. Stephen, are reminders that processing had not come to an absolute standstill in this county. The dairy industry continued humbly in this way in Charlotte County, even as it made rapid gains in the rest of the province. However, even these gains, which might eventually have spread to include Charlotte County in its prosperity, were soon cut short when the world went to war in 1914. Suddenly, young men who had been interested in the growing dairy processing sector were being shipped overseas as soldiers. Also, all technological, financial, and educational provision from the government was redirected from Kings County to Gloucester County in order to support the potato monoculture, which was necessary in order to feed the millions of army men overseas. Interest in cheesemaking declined continuously, and by 1940 only 13 cheese factories were still in operation. Today, there are 4. Back in 1891, before becoming the Provincial Dairy Commissioner, Professor J.W. Robertson had been summoned to New Brunswick to supply an official report to the federal government on the status of agriculture in the province. He wrote in his report, "It seems exceedingly strange that the province should pay out thousands of dollars every year for dairy produce, which could be produced within the province as cheaply and as of good quality as in the province of Quebec, from which this province imports a very considerable quantity. I have no doubt, but in a few years this will be stopped, and instead of being an importer, it will become an extensive exporter, receiving thousands of dollars yearly from the exports of cheese and butter." Robertson was quite right. At its most widespread, the dairy processing industry in New Brunswick, in the year 1900, there were 54 cheese factories and 33 butter creameries operating in the province. Over 1.8 million pounds of cheese were manufactured at a value of $189,706, and 462,600 pounds of butter were made at a value of $94,618. After learning the hard way by overextending ourselves in the markets of non-sustainable resources, such as intensive forestry, mining, and shipbuilding, and following the McCain family's more recent great success in processing the potato into various value-added products, it seems reasonable that the province of New Brunswick should look back to its brief experiment in encouraging its people to pursue careers in dairy processing. And it seems that Charlotte County could visit this opportunity for the first time.